So welcome everyone. I'm Phyllis Klein and this is Poets in Conversation. And tonight we have Charlotte Muse and Patrick Daly, two more married poets. I wonder if this is a trend. So Patrick and Charlotte happen to live just a really nice walk away from me in Menlo Park. And I've known them both for years. Through our mutual love of poetry and their reading series, The Not Yet Dead Poets. And I've actually taken a few classes with Charlotte over the years. So they have each now a full-length collection of poems that just came out very recently. And everyone who knows them is really excited to celebrate this milestone. Now we get to share their amazing poetry and our love for their poetry with a larger community. So now I'm going to read a poem of my own. That's how I usually start. And I chose this one today. It's a narrative poem. And it happens to be something that I wrote after reading a novel, which it has an epigraph by the author of that novel, whose name is Heather Rose, and the book is called Museum of Modern Love. And it's a book it's a really interesting book because it's based on, it's truth and fiction together combined. It's about the performance artist Marina Abramovich, who, if you don't know about her, she's really kind of wild and off the wall. Everything about her in the book is true, and all the other characters are fictionalized. So this poem is kind of the story of a true story of what Marina Abramovich, one of her performance artworks. And the poem is called "The Artist Marina Abramovich is Present," with the epigraph: "Pain is the stone that art sharpens itself on time after time." One at a time, 750,000 people sat in front of her at the New York MoMA over 3 months, no speaking, only looking into her eyes. Many of them moved to weep, many of them in line for hours, even camping out on the sidewalk for the next day's chance, getting to know each other. In another poem, I outlined the star she cut into her belly more than once, and the performance when she could have been murdered, the way people are pernicious. So terrible. I forgot about the love part. Something in her gaze, magnet drawing crowds into her room, sitting on a chair, motionless for 7 hours. Seduction into self-knowledge, lure of supposed intimacy, something real, true. I wasn't there. I imagine her from photographs, all in blue, red, then white. Each month a new color for the sameness of the days. Looking into me, whatever she sees reflected, reversed. Vision as a ball we toss, a loop of connection, a love letter, a recognition. How long would I last under the sun lamp of her eyes, the spell of her intensity? I want it to be love, to be hope. Why can't she let herself take a bathroom break, get a lunch and a stretch? Wouldn't that be love? If it's the stone, the sharp one, she's sharpening her body on it. If it's our nature, our lesions, they're healing, and her, love's daredevil, siren of eyes. Thank you. Now I will introduce Patrick Daly. Excuse me. For the past decade, Patrick Daly has been working for software startups, writing poetry on his lunch hours. His poem Words was a 2015 Poem of the Year in New Statesman. He has published poetry in many other magazines and e-zines, most recently in Portside, Ekphrasis, and the Sandhill Review. And poems of his have appeared recently in anthologies, including Extreme Sonnets, A Bird Black as the Sun, and America, We Call Your Name. His poem, Tiananmen Square, received honorable mention in the Pushcart Prizes, which is no easy thing. And his chapbook, Playing with Fire, won the Abby Niebuhr Memorial Prize. His first full-length collection, hooray, is Grief and Horses, just published by Broadstone Press. He likes walking in the woods, watching the warriors, the works of William Shakespeare, and even a few things not beginning with the letter W. So, Patrick, take it away.
Well, thank you, Phyllis. Thank you for inviting us. And I just want to say at the beginning, we have really quite a clutch of recently published poets here over the last year or so. Phyllis herself with the Full Moon Herald, and then Charlotte with In Which I Forgive the River, and then my book closely followed by Mary's These Things Remaining. So within a couple of square miles, we got some famous poets. And if I left anybody out, forgive me, because all of you are famous poets. Anyway, I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm just going to read. The first poem I'm going to read is called Shade. That tree, bright like a dancer on the sidewalk, on a burning day in the dry time, that shadow was not shade until the man across the street, hot and hatless, made his slow way over to stand in it. Not until it touched him, cooling his face, unbunching the muscles in his neck. Something within the shade sometimes will draw up the inside of the shading thing, which has to stand it patiently. And as we drink its cool and ease, the shade may reach into us. So when you walk on, the shade walks in your steps. As in Oaxaca, the grace and shadow of a single tree in bloom settled in me like gentleness we do not find here. And now I'm going to read a couple of family poems. Because my dad was in the military, we moved around quite a bit in my early to mid-childhood. We spent some wonderful years in Jamaica, and then my dad actually left the army, but immediately moved to Uganda. So these next two poems are set respectively in Jamaica and then Uganda. First one is called Simon. Sorry, Simon. Something about ears twitching away raindrops. The story of a small, strong dog, Simon, who loved us humans, but was hot to fight anything that moved or stupidly stirred on four legs, and dragged my poor parents one after another at the other end of a leash into stories no one wanted to be in. A pig down a mountain path, a German shepherd from one end of Exeter High Street to the other. But it was the twitch I was thinking of. The twitch of his ears, that first brought him to us. My father had bought him, tiny then, a puppy for me and my sister Harriet, and was carrying him to our house in his arms, and Simon, his sense of trouble already full grown, leapt out of my dad's arms and disappeared on a patch of wild scrub and trees. And this was Jamaica in the rainy season, and the rain was coming down hard and harder, and the lightning forking, and my mother said, "We'll start lunch, your father won't come home in this." And then there was my father, soaked, carrying Simon, a placid seal pup in his arms. telling us how he never would have found him in a kinglier hour of calling and cursing in the storm, but for the twitching of his ears under a bush. He put him down, and there was the cat hissing, and there was Judy, the mongrel we inherited with the house, standing over him like a tent or double-decker dog, ready to defend him fiercely, as my parents later had to, against injured parties, the pig owner, the goat owner, the uncounted dog owners, because he never meant harm and didn't know his own strength, but always wanted to try it, a knight at arms, living for the tournament. The cat disappeared contemptuously as we watched down into the cellar and right back out with 3 new kittens, and no need to say, there. And I will tell you about the turkey chick he once caught in his terrible locking jaws and held under one paw, captive but unbitten, in the shade of a tree, until he forgot, or I think took pity, and lifted the paw. So there was no question when we left for England of not taking Simon, and no question when they left for Uganda of not taking Simon, though they left us locked up in England in our grey boarding schools. But he kept fighting, and the police came, and they had to chain him up, but that was too sad, so they gave him away, far away, a farm in Kenya, they wrote and told us. And I still think the letter, the bitter letter Harriet wrote them back, how nice and peaceful your lives must be now, was about Simon. And maybe they should have let him go sooner, or never picked him up instead of being pulled, slithering and cursing into love. But 60 years later, looking out through this window opened by a wing shadow on green, a twitch or quick wrinkle in the surface of things, and seeing more than I want to, and less, I'm glad they embraced the trouble without asking if he was worth it for as long as they could stand it. And I'd say it's good to be loved that much, if not great. When he was good. And this one has a epigraph from Psalm 121. The sun shall not burn thee, the sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. Out of nights of flying ants, the tall mud towers where people lit fires to burn them out because ants are a delicacy, the wings, or did I imagine this, glowing in the firelight, all dark except the ant fires and the thin shaft of our headlights baffled by the dark, the swift dark of the equator and sudden heat of day, ripening coffee berries, a forest of vanilla, the yesterday, today, and tomorrow tree beside the veranda, the frangipani, huge cracks in the earth and red dust before the rains came like armies. The Black Mamba you disturbed in the woodpile early one morning and brought into our bedrooms for us to admire, dead, dangling from the machete, and Harriet obligingly screamed. From this steam of delicious soup that could never be England, from under the father wings of the memory of 11, arises a trip. A long, long trip in a car on a road not particularly meant for cars. And darkness again, an inn far out in the wilderness, the bush. And we sat outside to eat by lamplight, a symphony of insects and monkeys in the trees. Or else no, we sat inside in the dining room with oil lamps and fans, and you ordered yoti kwa yoti, everything for everyone. And it was in the morning we sat outside, after a night hardly asleep because of the bats at trestle tables, perhaps under a flowery trellis, and ate water buffalo meat, pale and stringy, you would not think it good. For breakfast in the dawn following the zooming night of the bats and their wing brushings. But I remember how good it was. And later that day in the game reserve at Queen Elizabeth National Park, after I took a photo of a living water buffalo and an African buffalo and long grass where a lion really was, the car came tiredly to a stop. And you got out and opened the hood and found the water hose broken and tore the plastic lining from our mother's travel kit and patched it. And you and I walked, your shadow enfolding me against the earth-cracking heat, to a water hole where there was a rhino I may have imagined and hippos I haven't, low in the water like fallen trees with faces for roots, cheeks and nostrils of stupendous uncles. only their eyes moving as we did, allowing us to fill our can. And as we walked back, I wanted to hold your hand, although I was too old, because it was marvelous. And the car started smooth as a cat. You were marvelous that day, when your shadow in the heat was still large enough to hold me without harm. That day, and for a little longer. And thought I'd follow that up with the poem I wrote right after my dad died of Parkinson's, Entomb for my father. My father sits in a small room. No, he is dead now. He sat in a chair all day, hardly moving, moving being so hard. But in my mind, no, he is dead now. I sit, thinking of him in that small room, moving being so hard. But in my mind, he still sits in the ever smaller cage of himself, thinking of him caged in that small room. I sit in a little room at work, and he still sits in the ever smaller cage of himself, trapped in my sorrow. I won't let him die. I sit in a little room at work, looking out at treetops. I could be him. Trapped in my sorrow, I won't let him die. I see myself growing smaller and less able, looking out at treetops. I could be him. It's hard to remember I'm not yet. I see myself growing smaller, less and less able to take a step, to shave, to brush my teeth. It's hard to remember I'm not yet, may never be him. For him, it's over, the struggle to take a step, to shave, to brush his teeth. But I wish he'd taught me more about standing upright. I may never be him. For him, it's over, the struggle he fought so gracefully. But he kept his strength to himself. I wish he taught me more about standing upright. I was always afraid he would fall. He fought so gracefully, keeping his strength to himself. I needn't have worried about propping him up, but I was always afraid. What if he fell and shrank like a leaf and skidded away? I don't know now if I was propping him up or just hanging on. In the end, he fell and fell. But in my mind, moving being so hard, not moving, in a chair all day, he sat. Though my father is dead now, though he is dead now, my father sits in a small room. And I think I'm doing all right for time. This poem is called Chosen, and it has an epigraph from Genesis. Noah was a just man, and Noah walked with God. And I chose to take walked with God perhaps more literally than the gospel writer, than the Genesis writer, intended. Noah was a just man, and Noah walked with God. Noah asked God as they walked together, what about the girls on the river path on his way to work, giggling in knots, loitering back from the first milking? The men fishing in the brightening grey, the women building up the fires, the mice and lizards starting at his tread, ruffling to safety in vain, the boys following him, calling his name, the younger ones wheedling for something sweet, the bolder imitating his walk, the walk of a man being careful not to seem pleased with himself. Did he remember years and years ago how the girls looked at him, and did he still have affection for the cover of certain trees in their last leaves now with their prescient birds shaken in an ill wind? Or did he just squat without a word and scratch down 300 by 50 by 30 cubits, start sketching the window here so high, the door here, sucking his teeth at the length of the keel, the draft so many times deeper than the river would bear? How was he going to explain that? Could he already feel himself riding steadily upward on the waters, looking down at the people clinging to the oars? Could he already see them letting go, sinking toward the flowers? the cows thrashing and roaring, the vigorous goats faltering, the crocodiles feasting for now. Did he wonder what he had gotten into when he began these walks with God? Did he look into his heart and draw breath to say no, all or none, and the ark, this earth that holds us? Did he ask aloud, what is justice? I suppose he thought, God is the Lord of hosts and I'm only Noah, thinking it was going to be a lot to make an ark in a week, and his wife and sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives and their children, and 1 pair of every unclean beast and 7 pairs of every clean beast, was going to be a lot to round up and bring on board. And I suppose he saw that not even God can keep himself from choosing, and went home and took his wife in his arms, and later lay in the dark, awake and still awake, until he got up and howled at the stars. But I wish he'd felt the giants and the great men of his youth at his back and risen to the no. He could have argued his modest boat building skills, the difficulties in finding and cutting gopher wood. He could have started on a bigger ark, impossibly huge, multiplying the cubits out to absurdity. He could have bargained for time, which God has always plenty of. And I'm going to stop there because we don't have always plenty of time, and I think that'll do it.
Well, thank you, Patrick. Wow, that was quite an amazing array of poems and such an emotional journey to take us on. Yeah, I'm wondering how did you decide to read those? Like, what was your thought process in terms of how you put that together?
Well, I don't know if the poem really if the reading makes a coherent reading, but I generally can hear my poems in my head as I write them, and I therefore, or as part of that, write them to be read. So I think for readings, I tend to pick ones that work particularly well in terms of being able to be read. And I use long lines sometimes to allow, I don't quite know how to say this, but to sort of follow the natural rhythms of the voice. And what one wants to do, I guess, is to allow the energy. The point of a long line is to allow the energy to flow through it and into the next line and into the next and into the next. So anyway, insofar as that works, that's why I chose these poems, because to my ear at least, they all read fairly well, and they're poems that I think that you can get on a single reading, and don't need to pore over or wonder how this goes with that. They're sort of narratives, I guess.
Yeah. There's so many precious moments in each one of those. I can just look in the chat for a minute. So we've written down some of the lines that we were impressed by. Joyce wrote, "I wanted to hold your hand, but was too old." I wrote, "I wish he taught me more about standing upright. I was always afraid he would fall." Some of these lines just, the one about the shade, like gentleness we do not find here, that it's like a kapow right at the end, yeah, which is what, for me, that's the sign of a great poem when it does that. So thank you so much, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Phyllis. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone.
Charlotte, maybe you could say a few things. I know you're there.
Yes, that's right.
Maybe ask Patrick some questions. Yeah, they're sharing the video because we had some technical difficulties right before we got started. So, yeah, do you want to make any comments before we go on to your reading?
About Patrick's reading?
Yeah. If you like.
Well, I love just the largeness of it. You know, all the details and the way they're very memorable, very colorful details, and it stays with you because it's both large of spirit and sort of large.
Absolutely, yeah. So I see that, Juan, you have your hand up. Could you hold that until we get done with Charlotte, and then I hope that'll be okay. Yeah. So for after Charlotte's reading, yeah. So that feeling of largeness, yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I was thinking of talking a little more about what your writing process is, Patrick, but maybe we could do that after. So.
Afterwards, it's fine, whatever works.
Yeah, let's do that afterwards. Let me cue up here my introduction for Charlotte. Just I have to kind of I have to say I'm still back in some of your images, and Patrick, and the feelings that you evoke are I just want to say, beautiful is the word that I want to use, and resonant, I guess. So we'll talk more. Okay, so
Thank you.
Here's Charlotte. Charlotte Muse lives, teaches, and writes in Menlo Park. She's taught poetry at San Francisco State, UC Berkeley Extension, the Lifelines Project, and many other venues. Her awards include the Allen Ginsberg Award, the Eleanor Benedict Poetry Prize, the Yates Society of New York's Poetry Prize, and 2 Atlanta Review International Publication Awards, among others. Wow. Her work has been published in journals, magazines, and anthologies. One of her chapbooks, A Story Also Grows, was made into a letterpress edition by the Chester Creek Press and bought by the Smithsonian, Library of Congress, Brown University, and UC Santa Cruz Rare Book Collections. Now I want to hear more about that. Her new book of selected poems, In Which I Forgive the River, by Broadstone Books, is her first full-length publication. Woohoo! She's married to the poet Patrick Daly, and she struggles to learn piano keyboard. She likes to be outside, walking or watching. So there you go, Charlotte.
Thank you, Phyllis. Thank you for this.
Who is that?
Okay, well, I'll just start, I guess. I'm starting, I realized that this is, my mother died 40 years ago, this year, in late fall. I think it was November. So I'm going to start with an old poem that I wrote for my mother. She died of she died of dementia very early. She was 58 or something when she got it, and she died 10 years later. So anyway, poem for my mother. My mother sits with her legs apart. Her useless freckled arms are shaking. Yellow liquid drips down her leg through a tube into a slowly filling bag. Fine, she says, fine. Where's Daddy? Her ugliness enrages me. The incessant little grunts, the fixed eyes, the bad smell. How dare she become a monster? Oh, Mother, where is your talcum powder? Your footsteps playing the stairs piano? Your chemical anger? Your liveliness, a fountain in the sunlight? Why does she hold so fast? like a scab to skin. She should do the decent thing and die. A risky climbing of the inner ladder, escape through the open eyes, hold her breath, and go. She cannot do it. She is falling slowly backwards, her head hitting the rungs, becoming a chimpanzee, then a lizard, a lichen on a rock in some cold stream. Losing memory. Street trees, luminous that rainy spring, unfolding new green along dark branches, small drops fingering individual leaves, I remember. And the airplane coming down toward the earth, arching up, the farewells, leavings, the goings back. I thought I had all of them. But the past is voracious, worming its way in, all its ghosts pleading, remember, remember, as if their lives depended on it. What I thought I knew is full of holes. There's no making the faces around the table live again. For all you know, a mouse died in the wall 2 days before that final dinner, and the faint stink made your father uneasy and morose. It was nothing, anyone said. Let his ghost ride the jet wing. Nothing happens the way we think. But I insist on a certain silver evening in a city where I used to live, or Manhattan, or a desert with cactus tall as trees and the air full of sage and miraculous rain, whether or not I was there at the time. This poem says, don't worry, you're the one whose heart was broken or awakened. Who knows the story better than you? A bee took me to the water. I wanted to be a steady poet, like a bee, hauling pollen back to the hive to make the luscious honey. When I saw one on the wild rose, I asked her how she did it. She laughed in B flat. Swallow me, she hummed. If you think on my name, I'll take you to the water. She brought me to a stream where we went in among soft mud, sharp stones, all the small moats floating where the sun comes in. Shadowy banks threaded with roots on either side, fish drifting in the push of the current. We rode it all the way to the mother of waters, heaving, heavy with salt. In the ocean's breath, I heard my own and longed to be absorbed, obeying the pull of the sun and moon in time with the rhythms of the world. But though the sea's salt is in my blood, she has countless children and no memory. Still, I came back to her, falling free, warm into cold, rising slowly through dim light. For the length of a breath, I was alive in two worlds. When I stumbled out, glazed and shivering, dazed like a time traveler who knows home is where half the heart is, I breathed the bee back gently into ordinary, necessary air. Rio Grande. This is in memoriam Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez and Angie Valeria Ramirez. After long miles and months of waiting, who would turn away? The river swollen, brown, sparkling in the sun, dangerous currents but narrow here. Just across the water is a country of dreams. The river moves as in a dream. Tanya watches Oscar swim across with her child. She sees them reach the other side. They catch their breaths. He rests a bit and tells the little girl to wait while he brings her mother. But she won't lend her father to the river. When she sees him swim away, she jumps in and tries to follow. He turns back for her. The river takes them both on its long, glistening tongue. In one gulp, it swallows them. What we know of their death is in the photo. Her small, curly head and her father's close together in his rolled up black t-shirt, staring down into the water as if looking for minnows. There's her little arm around his neck, his bare back and slender legs, his bare feet, his navy trunks with three white stripes along the side, her tiny black sneakers, her red pants. Someone showed the photos of Rosa in El Salvador. She said, I feel so many things, tenderness, because at no time did he let go of her. I told him, son, don't go, but if you do go, leave me the girl. He said to me, no, Mama, how can you think I would leave you? Many foreign miles away, looking at the photo, we hear the picture say those words, and something hard in us drowns, like a stone thrown into water. On eating stones. This was one of my Ascension poems, and about it was written about the Indians of the San Joaquin Valley who were very bravos, and everybody was afraid of them. Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. On the day the shirted ones came, the world ended. They walked here and brought their God and their guns and their horses, their ways to live and have riches. At first they gave us food, which was strange and delicious, but one day they gathered pebbles, washed the dust off, and held them out to us, smiling, so we thought they were magic. We each took one and ate it. Every day they gave us another. Every day we ate it until we clattered when we walked. It became impossible to run. We could hardly remember what we used to hunger for. Those stones pulled us down, trying to get us into their world where nothing moves unless something else moves it. More than once, I've seen in rocks the marks of creatures who became stone. Their hearts were not strong enough to resist its pull, but our hearts are still beating. We have taken on the endurance of stones. We will keep what we need of stone truth and spit out the rest. Okay, just looking, how am I doing for time? Thank you. I think I have a little more time. Okay. Drones. How do they work? Cleanly, efficiently, as if spraying insects. Someone sets coordinates that send the drone hovering high overhead among clouds in which there are no angels. The Predator is designed for spying, though it's armed with missiles. The Reaper is meant to carry out the kill chain, find, fix, track, target, execute, and assess high values, fleeting, and time-sensitive targets. A controller in Chicago can watch a house 7,000 miles away and the people who live in it, even their faces. Targets can't see the drone, but Chicago sees them. So in Pakistan, a woman going to the well can look back after the flash, the explosion, and see her house with its handmade blankets, dowry black bracelets, pots, the basket of dried lentils, the bed and chair, the clothes, the children, the picture, the mother-in-law, her smile, the husband, his anxiety, the goat tethered near the door. Even the golden dust motes in the house light disappear. The torturer describes his job. This has an epigraph. But my people heard not my voice, so I gave them up to the hardness of their hearts. Psalm 80. First, you make them strip. It puts them off balance. I always keep a poker face. They never can. There's a rush of dread in their eyes, and you know they're wishing they could be back home. Their bed, their chair, their blanket, that's what they want. There's a science to causing pain. You have to know how far to push it. I keep them so cold they can't think straight, I keep the lights on all the time. I don't let them sleep. I bend them and shackle them in ways you might have thought were impossible. I think to myself, you are a wall, and I am going to break you down. It's better if you're kind to them sometimes. They'll look at you with this yearning as if you were their mother and could fix this. So I'm always stern in the beginning, but as time goes on, I'll let up a little. Then they're full of gratitude. Their feelings get hurt when I start again. That weakens them. Sometimes I get the tough guys, the ones nobody else can break. They're brought to me because I'm good. I won't take no for an answer. If I have to kill them, I will kill them. I'll hang them from ropes and listen to them sing until blood turns their sweat to pink water. I'll milk every vessel in their bodies so they glow like the moonlight, whiter than anything alive. They will tell me what I want to know. The web of life spreads farther than you think. For every one I work on, 200 more will fear me. You have to know you're right to do this job. You have to stop your ears. Even in this God-forsaken place, everyone calls on God. I don't deal in mercy, but I haven't seen him answer many prayers in here. I hear them. Well, small ode to joy. Hurry, the red bud won't wait, or the freesia, or the silver-barked cherry. All the new web shining and floating like unrounded bubbles won't wait. They'll be gone even faster. Hurry. If we find ourselves asking whether this is the last spring, it's not because we want to know. It's only that asking makes us look. I know a walk to a waterfall, past smaller streams wetting the path, past butterflies flashing and banana slugs oozing slowly towards a heaven of pink-flowered sorrel. There's the sound of the stream, a distant woodpecker, and the falls themselves, where water pours down, spreading like hair over the rock. We don't owe everything to madmen who think we're only empty shoes in their jig with death. We don't owe everything to sorrow. Just a couple. I hope I'm doing all right. How am I doing with time? Okay, well, let's see. Hymn to ducks. Yeah? Okay, maybe I'll read Hymn to Ducks. Over the corn shocks, the stubbled fields of the fall, ducks are flying away from frost. Over waterways, gray in weak sunlight, they're flying, away from the hunter in his blind with his long gun pointed at the sky. Lines of them, flying their ancient journey while other eyes watch them with yearning. Below their beating wings, a toy harvester chugs to the barn. Tiny deer gleaning green shoots bound back to the forest like fleas into fur. The ducks, when they tire, ski into ponds, upending themselves in the water to eat. The way with which they greet grain on the bank, the furious tremors of their spoony bills separating seed from stone, their lily-pad feet, the quacks, the waddle, their gifts of wing, foot, and web. Ducks, you are a miracle. Here is my song. Let's see. I have two more. Is that too many? What time? Let's see. Okay. Waiting for the owl. Each night I go to lie on the forest floor for the pleasure of looking unblinded into the sunless sky. Other stars sparkle out from eternal space, and the friendly moon holds up his lantern. From here, trees are taller than stars. Amid bird-awake murmurs and animal rustles, insects make free with my hair. My eyes are on the sky. I am waiting for my Lord Owl. I have come out of comfort to meet him. to look into his eye wells as into a canyon and see his perfect lack of love. Now his wings whiff the air. Now he's stringing invisible garlands from tree to tree. He is looking for what he will this night. My body whitened by the moon is food for the owl. He's circling closer. I'm offering him my heart, though I know he takes what he chooses. When he's feasted, we'll fly always together. I'm practicing surrender, that hardest of disciplines. I want to prove I can pour my measure of life willingly back into air. I might as well read this, I guess. Zizou at the Bar de la Door, February 1909. This is a photograph of his brother by J.H. Lartigue in Biarritz, France in 1909, where the Adour River meets the sea. Zizou is alone, watching a wild cloud of spume rise at the Bar de la Door. There's his felt hat, the back of his long woolen coat, streak of white collar, dark trousers, black shoes. You dressed in your gentleman's clothes then and went to look at the water. His shadow is long and thin. The sand is coarse. A line of surf folds gently near the shore, but not far out. A riot of water crashes against the seawall. Zizou with his shadow before him on a cold day. His head is turned slightly away from the ocean. His faint profile is young. Though everything is stopped by the photograph, it's a picture of motion. The ocean heaves, the seawall endlessly trips it up. Zizou was walking, but stops the camera. He's looking at his shadow as if he had a thought strong enough to shift his attention from the surf. A sudden regret, a flash of joy, something he forgot. You should go back and unlock the door. What if Marie comes and he's not there? He thinks of his mother, how she was afraid to let him walk near the surf and never allowed him to go to the seawall. But now he's gone, now she's gone, and here he is. I've come into the picture, outside the frame. I'm watching Lartigue watch Zizou through his camera while the sea roars. The sky is as gray as it is in the photo. There's a loud silence, which seems to hold a certain proportion. The man does not walk too close to the water, which is always held back by the shore. One ambled at the Bar de la Door. One hurried when it was time for lunch. One checked one's watch. Lartigue has stopped everything but the watch, always ticking closer to Sarajevo and the Great War and the war after that and the ends of so many worlds.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Charlotte. And why don't we all unmute now and give them both a big hand? Yeah. Wow.
Both of you have such range.
Yeah, Connie, thank you for saying that. Yeah. What kind of range were you thinking? Like,
Well, both of you have a sensitivity to nature that is very extremely strong. And yet then one finds oneself as a reader plunged into war, torture, the torturer's job. Neither of you shrinks from the hard things, and yet you don't throw it all away on despair. You know, the wonderful line about we don't owe it all to sorrow. And you always strike that note. And yet the voices are very different, but you really have a similar range. I think you've done each other good.
Thank you.
oh, what an amazing, what an amazing summary for, thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm
Yeah,
really glad
thank
to
you.
be here. Thank you for the invitation.
I'm glad you came.
Yeah. So, do you want to respond to Connie's comment? It's really amazing to get all that from listening.
Well, I have both books.
Oh, so you've read them, yeah.
I was trying
By
to
the way,
follow.
we haven't held them up, so I'll hold up.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah. And I'm going to hold up hers too while we're
While we're holding
yeah,
up.
because they're musical books.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, what a lot of books.
Yeah. So Juan, yeah, thanks for waiting for your question. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I couldn't help but think as I was listening, the question of has any of these ever made their way into, okay, you know what, this is leaning more to the side of prose, and I'm going to stick only to that, or to, like it seems like you balance both real well, both of you. So, but the prosaic feeling is very present there. And I was just wondering if it ever kind of, where do you make the distinction of like, okay, you know what, this is gonna be prose, or like I can actually play around with both of these. Like, where does that take over, and where you make that decision and say, okay, you know what, I'm going on this direction?
Right.
I don't, that's a question that is really pretty endlessly, in these days, it's really like asking what is a poem, because we used to know, and like Patrick's wonderful poem, his Pantoum for his father, that's in a form, that kind of circles back and everything. But now it just seems like things are a poem if somebody says they're a poem. I mean, there is a whole thing about sort of a universe of the poem, a center to it, and a condensation of emotion that makes it a poem, and not, it has sort of a little world and a beginning, middle, and end inside the prosy part, but anyway, I don't know, and I keep hoping, and I keep wanting to try more forms and more rhymes, because it's something I want in the world too. I want more songs. I want people to sing. They used to, or even whistle. Do you remember people walking down the street whistling? Things like that. I think we need rhythm. People forget about the power of rhythm and rhyme and melody and all these things. So anyway, sorry, I guess I've talked too much, but it was an interesting question.
Not at all.
Maybe Patrick has more to say.
Well, I agree with Charlotte about you have to, if you're making a poem, you really have to make the poem. It's a made thing, and whether breaking it up into lines helps that or hurts that or doesn't make any difference, I think is a very good question about any poem. And actually, to go, I think, right to your point, I will quite often, write a poem, and then if I'm questioning myself about the rhythms, I will simply, thank God for word processors, take out all the line breaks and see what I've got. And occasionally, it is a prose poem. All the other things apply. It has to have a unity. It has to have a coherence that is almost three-dimensional. I think a good poem. That's it's not just prose is you say this and then you say that and then you say that, and if you're a good writer, you say it well. But you are not trying to create an object. And I hope this doesn't sound fanciful. I think in a poem you are, and the rhythms as sort of marked by the line breaks, are part of that. And as I say, if the line breaks aren't doing that for you, then you've got a prose poem, but it's great, And there's a difference, I think, in a prose poem. In some ways there's more freedom, and in some ways there's less, because then the other elements, since you're not using the lines as rhythm markers, the other formal elements of the imagery and perhaps repetition and variation and things like that, they perhaps come more into play in a poem that is not lineated as verse. But then I think there's actual verse. There's a poem by Philip Levine about how some things, are so, I can't say it quite right, but they must be said without meter and rhyme. And actually, in that poem, you can hear quite distinct, verse feet, even while he's saying that some things don't need that. The poem is called The Simple Truth, and I recommend going, and it's a wonderful poem in itself. But listen to the buoyant rhythms in a poem saying, we don't need verse. We don't. This is the master poet. Do not try this at home. Anyway,
Thank you so much.
Mm. Yeah, other questions or comments?
What was the name of that poem again by Philip Levine?
The Simple Truth. It's the title poem of his book that won the Pulitzer Prize.
Thank you.
Ah, right. Is that the one, Not This Pig, or is that?
No, that's earlier. That's actually quite a bit earlier, I think.
I just got one of his books. Yeah.
But the poems in that period are very strongly rhythmical. Like They Feed They Lion.
Yes, I used to have that one.
I love that one.
Yeah.
Well, it makes me think about, what makes a poem great. And I know in the chat, I think Dachin, I think you said that one of Charlotte's poems made you cry, brought you to tears. So to me, that's the mark of greatness. If a poem can do that, that's one mark. So I don't know if you want to say, I don't mean to put you on the spot. If you want to say any more about that, you'd be welcome to.
I'm crying anyway because I'm sitting with a bunch of poets. I'm thinking Bob Smith sitting next to me.
Right.
But that poem about the indigenous, the people and the stones, and that brought up, and
indigenous.
Oh my God! It brought home. It's like it brought home history, and in a not very long poem, the imagery, and it brought home history of what's been done. And pain, suffering, horror, and resilience. Anyway, I thought it was brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. That's a wonderful poem.
Thank you.
Yeah, Charlotte, do you want to say anything about writing that one? Like, how did that?
Well, it's part of the, Alice, my friend who was here, has a friend, I know him too, Eric Remington, and he gave me a manuscript of the unpublished interviews that John Harrington, then the head of the Smithsonian, had with Ascension Solorzano. She died in 1930. And so there are just these stories that she told. She spent the last, 6 months or so of her life telling him everything she could about their culture and their stories. And anyway, so I would just read some little part of what she said, and then somehow I made like a series of poems about them, and I can't explain it. I think I once did try to, and Phyllis asked me something about that, but I feel some strange connection to Ascension. I mean, she died. She was the last fluent native speaker of the Mutsun tribe in San Juan Bautista, and they built San Juan Bautista. Anyway, I feel some kind of connection to her. It's like I felt like she was somehow talking through me or something, or I was talking, I don't know. There was some kind of thing there where I was trying to make her stories live. And, you know, I know there's a lot of controversy about, you know, people talk about, you know, appropriating other cultures, although I think every culture appropriates, otherwise only one of us would have fire or something, you know, but anyway, I don't know. There's some mysterious thing about that sometimes you make some connection somehow. I don't know.
Yeah. And so tell us more about the Smithsonian. Like, so your book is in the Smithsonian, is that right?
Yeah, well, this is also, I mean, a series of things that, trust me, never happen. Well, one was a friend of mine said, you know, you should send these poems to a fine press, you know, a letterpress. They would make a nice letterpress edition. And I did send it to the Chester Creek Press because I looked online. I spent some time and I looked online. And I thought, boy, this guy teaches letterpress and everything. So I sent him, like, I don't know, some of these poems, and then I forgot about it. And so, like, I don't know, 2 weeks later, he said, send me the rest of the manuscript. And I thought, who is this? You know, what, you know?
Wow.
So I did. And, yeah. And then he just said, well, I'm going to take this on. And, you know, it took him like a year. And I kind of almost like didn't hear from him too much. But, you know, after a year, he made the paper, he made the drawings in it, he did the whole thing. So he just did that without, oh, okay. Yeah, we have. Anyway, so then,
do you have a copy of it? Wow.
Yeah, so he took a trip, and this is one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Each one is different, but this is one of them. And anyway, so it was just, I feel like it's something that I didn't have anything to do with. in you know,
That's the best way.
An illustration.
Yeah, well,
when it happens like that, you know, when you don't have to try very hard, that's just so beautiful.
Yes, and it will never happen to me again, or, you know, it just doesn't, you know. Everybody knows.
I was trying to find the snake.
Oh, the snake
So
is kind of in the middle there.
Chris Cummings writes, Charlotte's book, A Story Also Grows. Oh, Muriel has a copy too.
Yeah.
In the letterpress edition, it's a beautiful piece of art. Look at that. Wow.
Yeah, he made, anyway.
It's a spectacular
book. It's a beautiful book. But so
Talk
I didn't.
About love. Talk about an act of love to do that for you.
It was an act of love. And he's like a real artist. He just does things, and then he, you know, he does more things, which is kind of wonderful. But anyway.
Yeah. Patrick, were you going to say some more, or I couldn't tell?
No, I used to work in a used bookstore, and I'm someone who loves books as objects, and this is just a beautiful thing. Is what I'll just hold it up one more time.
Charlotte, do you have any copies? This is Chris, sorry. Do you have any copies available?
Well, it is available. There's still a few of them at the Chester Creek Press.
Oh, really?
And so you have to go to the Chester Creek Press. I think maybe I wrote or someone asked me to put it in the chat.
Put it in the chat. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I also wanna say, I just wanna note, that Dachin, you mentioned Bob, and I just wanna, just say something about Bob, because a lot of people knew him, yeah. And so,
Bob Evans. So,
yeah, your husband, yeah.
yeah. So, I don't know. He died 2 years ago, summer of 2019, and many of you know. And I miss him every day. And I'm surrounded by poetry. I've got all my poetry books going back to my teen years. I've got all his poetry books. I've got I'm making a life in Eugene, which is where we were both going to come, in Oregon. And I find it's like wonderful to thank you so much for the invitation to attend this and any of the other readings that I've gone to. I went to Mary's and then the Broadstone Brooks, what is it called? Broadstone, right? Reading.
Broadstone, yes.
Yeah, that I feel him with me. It makes me cry, but both in good and bad. I feel him with all of us, and Mary Detter brought us together. So
Mary, okay.
We owe her forever for that.
My pleasure.
It's a nice plotting. Absolutely.
And I know Charlotte and Patrick, you were good friends, right?
Good friends. And they became my friend through Bob.
Yeah.
They were, and Mary Marcia, and I know a lot of these names, and Muriel and April. April's there. Yeah, and I think many of us miss him, and he was that big presence.
Yeah, I wish I'd known him. Yeah.
But I have his poetry going back to 1994 because he was an idiot about computers, and he had Apple Works for years and years on his very old Mac, and so I could never convert them to Word. And his best friend Jeff, who lives in Ithaca, is a master IT guy, so he somehow converted all of them, and I have all his poems.
That's another gift.
It's a huge gift. And then I think Jeannie Watson's husband, Bill, put a video of Bob's reading at the main gallery. It's online. So I can watch him actually reading.
Yeah, so I think Bill Watson did that. He made that video.
My God.
Oh, there you are.
Thank you for asking. And
welcome.
Presence and spirit is with everybody. I look outside and I'm surrounded by trees in Oregon. It's like, sometimes I just look up and it's like, there he is, kind of sitting on the branch.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then at his memorial service in this Unitarian
church,
Universalist, and on their, in back of their altar, instead of having a crucifix, they had this huge tree branch that just was so like Bob, but also I just thought, it's better than a crucifix, the tree of life or the tree of whatever.
It was perfect.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me if we put that up
memorial.
special. That if we put that up special
Perfect for that memorial.
Yeah.
No, I think
that's what they have.
Yeah, it was up there anyway.
Yeah, it's up there, and he took care of all their trees. That's partly anyway. So there's Bob, and he's missed desperately by his daughter Phoebe, and so.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about David Cummings's forward in your book, Patrick. And one of the things he says is about your poems being being so much about grief and loss and empathy. And so I was thinking about that as we were talking about losing someone so beloved to our community. And I guess the poem of yours, the one that really got me in the gut, Patrick, was the one about the dog.
Oh, yeah.
Simon.
And that just the way you oh gosh, the way you wove together the dog and then the two of you and your sister, you know, kind of being left.
Yeah.
And you did that, and it really such a remarkable way. And that's, to me, that's also it's another sign of greatness when a poem can do that. When you read a poem and you feel like you're right there in that experience, you feel it. You get the feeling of like, what is it like to be, you know, someone, a being of some kind who's too much trouble in a way, or that feeling that we probably all have experienced in one way or another.
Yeah.
And you put it in there in such a way. So I don't know if other people, you know, want to say some more about that, but that's what I wanted to say to you about that.
So I'll just say that I wish I still had the letter that Harriet wrote. She was 13. She was 13. She might have been 14, because I was 11. And that was a masterpiece. You know, that was that came right out of the 18th century, you know, Augustan satire canon. I mean, she was furious, and she expressed it with, you know, this furious irony, you know, how peaceful your life must be now. You know, of course, we weren't there. Now the dog wasn't there. And Harriet just, you know, to say she nailed it is too much of a cliche. I mean, she just, I don't know what my parents felt when they got that letter, but they should have been ashamed of themselves.
She's so young to have been satiric, you know, ironic. It seems like it's a, you know, something you come into later. She was very good at it, young.
She was very good at it. I mean, she went on about how, you know, she gave details about how they would be listening to the Grieg piano concerto, and they would, how enjoyable that must be without all these distractions. And really, it was a masterpiece.
Yeah, and it just it really, the message really got across, even though it was ironic and all that. It was just, to me, it was quite sad too. So, and I appreciated that in the poem.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you.
So Juan, before you we'll get to your question in 1 minute. I just wanted to say that there's a number of people in the room here who have contributed to the back either backs of your book or books, or in a forward. Yeah. And so I want to mention that April, I know April has something for you, Patrick, and Muriel has something for Charlotte. And who else? Who am I missing here? And David, of course, has a forward.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I had something for your book too. Yeah. Charlotte. Yeah.
Yes.
So I just
And
think
Alice made
Alice Cummings.
is right there.
Yeah.
Oh,
That was
Alice.
her photograph.
Oh, okay. So another, that's just beautiful. Yeah. Another contribution. Yeah. And everything that people said, it rings really, really true, and is so beautiful in the way that the comments are there. So, you know, if we have time, we may not, but, you know, I just thought of actually reading some of those, because they express so much about, you know, kind of the essence of what the two of you are doing. So yeah,
I have to leave soon. I'm sorry, but I do have the books and I can read the covers again.
Oh yeah, please do.
Yes. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it very much.
Hey, Mary, just before you leave, are you able to hold up your book?
Oh yes.
Good point.
Just a second.
And actually, we're trying. Mary and I are trying to figure it. Oh, yeah, hold it up a
And
little.
and the cover is by Joyce, who is also here today.
Oh, really? Another.
It's a detail from her painting.
Wow. what a
It's
great.
beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
It's a beautiful book, Mary.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Mary and I are figuring out what we're going to be doing to celebrate her book. Oh,
Yeah.
keep tuning in for that. Yeah. And if people need to leave, it's just fine. We'll go on for another 10 minutes, and then after that, if anybody wants to stay a little longer, that's fine too. But Juan, I know you had a question, so yeah.
Yes. I had a question about, I would like to know what titles mean to both of you and how you go about incorporating them. How are they related to it? What do they mean? Are they connected, not connected? Just kind of that whole aspect of it.
Titles. What a great question.
It is. I think that I have come to the point where I kind of like to have a title before I start writing the poem. It's sort of like, I didn't used to be that way, but I am now. I feel better when I've thought of a title. I don't always do it.
In my case, it's the opposite. I write the poem, and I usually will give, just so I can find it, I will give the draft a title, but it's usually not what the poem winds up being called. And I sometimes have trouble thinking, what should I call this, or maybe I should change the title. And sometimes I will change the title and change it back again. And I think I've published poems and then decided they really weren't called what they were published as. So it's, for me, the title is probably the last thing. And it's important, because someone may read the poem or not, depending on what you call it. So it's not that I think it's an afterthought, but it's probably the part of the poem that or any poem that works. It's the part that I've had most trouble with.
Could I say one thing completely off the subject? I see that
Yes,
there are a
you
lot
can.
of comments. There are a lot of comments in the chat, but we're sharing Patrick's computer because we had these technical problems, and I don't really know how to answer them or whatever, and it's kind of too delicate to mess with, if you know what I mean. I'm afraid if I even touch this one, it's not.
Yeah. Do you want to know what's in the chat?
Well, no, I think we could save it, but I feel bad that I cannot. If people had some comment that I might answer,
we can't, because we're having to use the
Oh,
phone
I
for the
see.
sound,
Yeah,
it's
and
sitting
I've been
on the
Let's see.
touchpad.
Right. Yeah. So let's
Yeah.
see if there's anything else. I may be missing some too. Diane writes, Charlotte, I will remember the B and B flat and swallowing the stones. So that's from Diane Mooney. Yeah.
Thank
Those
you.
lines are going to
I just
stay
wanted
with, those are going to stay with me. They just,
I just wanted to point out, because Charlotte didn't, that it's actually true that a B hums in B flat, right?
Yeah,
It really does.
yeah, it does.
I believe you.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So
I have to go now, but thank you so much. I've really enjoyed
yeah,
this.
yeah,
session.
Connie
thanks
will be
for
in
coming.
touch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
the
coming.
wonderful-
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd love to have email addresses. That'll be great.
Yeah, I put mine in the chat for you,
Oh,
actually.
thank you.
Yeah, and I'll
Sorry,
say
I have to hurry off. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Bye.
Okay.
Good writing. everyone.
Bye. Thank
So you
Yeah,
know what I
thank
was
you.
thinking? Bye. Yeah. I was thinking. Oh, Mary Marcia, you had a comment. So why don't you make your comment, and then I had an idea for us to finish up.
Okay, I have a very quick question in terms of in form. I don't think of you, either of you, as very much in writing in form, but the Pantone stands out so much. Yours, Patrick, the father, and I want to know how you felt in come to write it that way, and that it helped you work through your grief or exercise it in some way?
I think obviously a form like that, you don't just sort of find yourself writing. But I think the repetitiveness of the pantoum form is very like the sort of cycles which seem like circles of grief. And I don't want to get too fancy with this, but perhaps the fact that the form, you know, you repeat, but then you introduce new, and then you repeat and you introduce new. I think that is like the cycle of grieving. If sometimes you just get stuck in grief, and the poem is partly about that, I guess. But I think the pantoum is in a way a hopeful form, because it, you know, you go through that cycle and then you go a little bit, you know, you don't quite come back to where you don't stop where you started or where you were in the previous stanza. So I think the pantoum it works for grief. I think the villanelle works for anger. I have a very angry poem in the book that's the villanelle, and I think that in a way, I think, you know, you deliberately choose a form if you do, but that somehow the form chooses you. You know, the emotion reaches out and connects with the form, or even something in your brain sort of knows that this should be a villanelle, or this should be a sonnet, or this should be a. That's the only pantoum I've ever written. I've written other villanelles and I've written boatloads of sonnets, but that's the only pantoum.
Yeah, so we've got a few comments in the chat. One is Myrna says, this reading was such a gift, it touched me deeply. And I think she needs to leave. So when I say bye to Myrna, thanks so much for coming.
Bye, Myrna. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Another really good friend. Yeah. And Muriel says, Muriel really likes your question, Juan, and an interesting answer. So as a way to finish up, I was thinking that I know both of you had two poems that are written by someone else. And I thought maybe we could close up with those. If you would say a little bit about why you chose it, and then read it as our two closing poems. We had some technical difficulties, so we're going to re-record the last part. And what my question to both of you was, if you had a poem written by somebody else that you might want to leave us with, tell us whose poem it is, of course, and why you chose it. So on that note, who would like to go first?
I don't care. Shall I go first, or Patrick?
Sure,
Maybe
yeah.
you. Okay, well, I will.
Okay.
I chose Encounter by Czesław Miłosz. Shall I just read it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. I'll tell you why I like it. Encounter. We were riding through frozen fields in a wagon at dawn. A red wing rose in the darkness, and suddenly a hare ran across the road. One of us pointed to it with his hand. That was long ago. Today, neither of them is alive, not the hare, nor the man who made the gesture. Oh, my love, where are they? Where are they going? The flash of a hand, streak of movement, rustle of pebbles. I ask not out of sorrow, but in wonder. So I love this poem. This is Czesław Miłosz. It was written in 1936 in Vilnius, Lithuania. He was born in Lithuania and actually left that year for Poland and then on to Paris. But this was during the rise of Hitler. But anyway, that's not really germane, although it's behind things, I think, in this poem. Mm-hmm. But I love this poem because of its just beautiful, deep, resonant simplicity. He just makes this scene, you know, riding through frozen fields in a wagon at dawn. There's nothing fancy about the language, but it's somehow unforgettable. We're there, you know, in the wagon, and a red wing rose in the darkness. So the sun's rising, and then a red wing like the sun is rising. And suddenly a hare ran across the road, something on the ground running crisscross. One of us pointed to it with his hand. And that's really essential to the poem. It would just be landscape without that. But we have a witness, you know, someone pointed to it with his hand. And so that gesture, it brings the whole scene into focus as a kind of something important. Someone saw this, someone witnessed it. And the poet, of course, witnesses with the witness, you know. So anyway, then he says that, and we have this scene fixed in our mind, and then he pulls back. That was long ago. Neither one of them's alive. So he positions it in the place of memory. Mm-hmm. And so we have this unforgettable scene that becomes almost like a memory to us. And because of the pointing, it becomes a memory, you know, it has importance. So then he asks, oh, my love, where are they? Where are they going? So I have an idea that the person he's speaking to must be dead. The reason I think that is because the questions he asks can't be answered by someone who's alive, but it might not be. That's just my fancy. But when he asks, where are they? Where are they going? The flash of a hand, the streak of movement, the rustle of pebbles. Those are huge questions. They're, you know, they're about the meaning of life and time and experience and, you know, what stays in the world, what stays, in, you know, does anything. It's just a huge question. And then he says so simply, I ask not out of sorrow. In other words, you know, he understands this is past. He's wondering. I mean, there is something wonderful about our lives and about what we see in our lives and everything. Whether or not the huge question is it has any meaning beyond ourselves or stays anywhere or somehow is lost in the river of time or something. Anyway, so I this is why I love this poem.
Oh, Charlotte. Oh.
And anyway, yeah, I just think that mostly he was a young man when he wrote this, and mostly this kind of simplicity is one of the things that we old people can more easily lay claim to, you know, because we kind of unpeel our lives until we finally get, you know, to the core of what happens. So there's genius in this. I think that a man so young could see, I think young people do have simplicity, they just don't know it or they don't understand, you know, there's too many new things.
A lot of wisdom in that, yeah.
So anyway, maybe that's enough.
Wow. Well, what it made me think of is the importance of every event that happens in every life, even though it may not be remembered or be able to be categorized or chronicled in any way. Each moment is beautiful.
Yeah,
and tragic too.
Absolutely. And I feel that as poets, we can learn from this. You know, we can have, I'm sure that if you thought there's some scene you saw, some vision that, I mean, however small or large it is, that is imprinted on you, on your mind, and that, you know, you could write that and you could see, you know, move back and forth through time as he did in your own way. Anyway, that's something that
a beautiful writing prompt. Yeah.
Yeah.
And such a beautiful message for the new year as we sit on New Year's Eve here together, the three of us. So thank you. So Patrick, how about you?
Well, I have Daybreak by Galway Cannell from his collection Mortal Acts, Mortal Words. And here is the poem. On the tidal mud, just before sunset, dozens of starfishes were creeping. It was as though the mud were a sky, and enormous, imperfect stars moved across it, as slowly as the actual stars cross heaven. All at once, they stopped. And as if they had simply increased their receptivity to gravity, they sank down into the mud. They faded down and lay still. And by the time pink of sunset broke across them, they were as invisible as the true stars at daybreak. And Charlotte and I did not collaborate or put our heads together as to which poems we would choose, but I think there are some strong similar, given the great difference in geography and culture between Galway Canal and age too, Galway Canal and
That's off Miłosz.
Miłosz. I'm sorry, I just Polish was getting caught around my tongue. And Miłosz. I think they do have remarkable similarities. Simplicity being the prominent one, and something seen, and then that thing given to us, the readers. Charlotte and I used to have, for years, we had a poetry radio show on KKUP, and we had a section called, at the beginning, usually called Poems We Wish We Had Written. And this is a poem I would give my eye teeth to have written, especially if I knew where my eye teeth were exactly. But anyway, this to me is how to write a poem. I say simple, and it's simple, especially in contrast to Cannell's earlier work, where he, as he says, he loves language, and his language is clotted and dense, and at his worst, it's sort of ornate and flashy. And here, as you could hear, it's been pared down to something simple and grave, and he has also, and perhaps this is the inverse of what Charlotte said, he has removed himself from this poem almost as if he were a photographer, but he's not. And there are things, that there is, as somebody says, and no one quite knows who did say this actually, ars est caelere artem, the art is to hide the art. The art in this poem is just, it's very restrained, but it's there. We could notice that the lines, as if they had simply increased their receptivity to gravity with the internal rhymes, and you can sort of feel them being sucked, the starfish being sucked down. And thinking of starfish themselves, it's interesting that starfish really do not look like actual stars. They look like are symbols of stars. They look like what we're taught in the third grade or earlier to make of a star. So Cannell was very much interested in and influenced by Rilke, and it was Rilke in the first Duino elegy who talked about we're not very securely at home in our interpreted world. So the stars are interpreted stars. The actual starfish are being compared to our symbols for them, and then to the real stars. And Cannell does this certainly without us noticing as we read. It's something that perhaps dawns on you as you think about the poem. But then at the end, we're talking about the real stars. They were as invisible as the true stars at daybreak. And the beauty in what has happened in this poem, the inversion of the mud, which is sky, and the sky, which has got starfish in it, All of this is done without any flash or without drawing attention to itself in any way. And as I say, you have to study the poem to see the skill with which this is done. But I think I would go back and almost exactly echo what Charlotte said, which is that, you know, this is something seen. It's not something. It is a poem. A good poem is a made thing, and this is a made thing. But it's something seen and given to us, and if one can do that, if a poet can do that, then you have given something to the world. And all that time you spent sitting at your desk or, you know, walking around, you know, sort of mumbling to yourself, it's all worth it. You've done something. You've made something, and you have given a gift. There's a wonderful
Patrick,
book by
yeah.
Lewis Hyde called The Gift, which I recommend to everyone. But anyway, this to me, this poem is a gift that I am will be to my dying day grateful to have received.
Oh my goodness. Could you say the name of that book again? The Gift?
It's The Gift by Lewis, Lewis Hyde, Hyde.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
It's not an easy read, but it's an intensely rewarding read.
Well, what you were talking about made me think of a good way to end our reading for tonight is just putting in a plug for any kind of poetry group where you get together with people who are kind and generous and actually get this kind of thorough, thoughtful discussion about your own poetry, which can be, I find that to be just very much what you're saying about feeling like it's all worth it, no matter what happens to your poem. Just knowing that other people have read it and been looking at it, try to understand it, can be really helpful. That's not the only way to feel good about a poem, but I just thought I'd put that plug in. And I want to thank both of you so much for your reading and all the energy and effort that you put into our time together. And thank everybody for coming, and wish everybody a very much better, healthy, and interesting new year.